You think Ron Howard is Hollywood's nicest guy? The calm, collected director everyone adores? The man who wins Oscars and makes everybody feel welcome on set? Think again. Behind that warm smile and those polite interviews, Ron Howard has carried a secret for decades, a mental blacklist of 7 stars he swore he would never work with again. These were not random strangers. They were his collaborators, his co-creators, some of them his heroes. They stood beside him during the biggest moments of his career, helped him build his reputation, and then shattered the peace he had spent his entire professional life protecting. And once you know who they are and what they did, you will understand completely why even the nicest man in Hollywood eventually learned to walk away. Russell Crowe is the first name on that list, and perhaps the most explosive. Ron Howard once called Cinderella Man the toughest film of his life, and the reason had a name. From the very first day of production, their partnership felt like a ticking time bomb. Crowe did not walk onto that set like an actor. He walked on like a general preparing for war. He wanted control, he wanted command, and he wanted confrontation, 3 things that Ron Howard had spent his entire career carefully avoiding. They had already clashed quietly during a beautiful mind over creative decisions. But Cinderella Man in 2004 turned that simmering tension into open, public hostility. Crowe challenged every single choice Howard made. Lighting, pacing, camera placement, nothing was sacred. In the middle of one brutal boxing sequence, he shouted across the ring that Howard did not understand the character's pain. Howard stared back, silent but furious. The crew whispered that it felt like watching 2 titans trying to outwill each other. Crowe insisted on reshooting entire monologues because he did not believe the emotion was landing. Howard fought desperately to keep the schedule from collapsing entirely. In private, he confided to producers that directing Crowe felt like riding a bull while trying to build a church. Even after the film earned widespread praise, Howard refused any reunion. Reporters kept asking. His answer never changed. Once was enough. Jim Carrey is the second name, and his story is one of the most chaotic chapters in Howard's career. How the Grinch Stole Christmas should have been a joyful Christmas fantasy. Instead, it became one of the most mentally exhausting experiences of Howard's entire life. Carrey spent 8 hours every single day being buried inside layers of latex and foam rubber. By day 3, he was snapping at everyone, makeup artists, assistants, and Howard himself. He stormed off the set on one infamous morning screaming that Howard should try acting inside a rubber coffin. When he was on set, he improvised entire scenes without warning, threw scripts to the floor in frustration, and changed dialogue mid-take without telling anyone. One crew member described the atmosphere as walking on broken glass every morning. Howard's famous calm cracked. He called an emergency meeting with Universal executives to explain that the production was spiraling. The studio actually brought in a Navy SEAL survival expert, the same man used to train soldiers in extreme conditions, just to keep Carrey from quitting entirely. When filming finally wrapped, Howard looked exhausted in every behind-the-scenes photograph. He smiled politely when reporters asked about Carrey and said he brought a lot of energy. Privately, he admitted the shoot had aged him years. The movie became a Christmas classic. The friendship did not survive it. Tom Cruise is the third name, and their clash on Far and Away in 1992 remains one of the most legendary power struggles in Hollywood history. At that time, Cruise was completely untouchable, riding the wave of Top Gun and Born on the 4th of July. Howard was building his reputation as a disciplined, detail-oriented filmmaker who valued patience and precision above everything else. Their visions could not have been further apart. Cruise wanted every single movement to explode with raw emotion. Howard wanted silence, stillness, and control. One afternoon in Dublin during a rain-soaked sequence, Cruise stopped mid-take, threw off his gloves, and barked that the scene did not feel real. Howard looked at him and said quietly that real was not about noise. The crew went completely silent. Nicole Kidman, standing between the 2 men, tried to calm things down. It did not work. Cruise began rewriting blocking, demanding extra takes, arguing loudly that the scene needed blood rather than calm. Howard's smile disappeared permanently. He started shooting extra coverage in secret because he did not trust Cruise to deliver the same performance twice. When asked about it later, Howard replied simply that some people confuse passion with chaos. He never cast Cruise again. Mel Gibson is the 4th name, and their experience on Ransom in 1996 was a battlefield from the opening day. Howard thought he was hiring a professional. Gibson arrived fresh off his Oscar wins for Braveheart and immediately tried to run the set as if he were directing it himself. Howard's scripts were famously tight, and his direction was meticulous. Gibson tore that order apart. He questioned lighting choices, rewrote lines in the middle of scenes, and delivered instructions to the crew as though he were a second director. During one heated confrontation, witnesses say Gibson slammed his script on the table and declared loudly that he knew what the audience wanted and he wanted an Oscar for it. Howard's reply was quiet but devastating. He said simply that Gibson was not the director of this one. The air went cold. Every scene from that point on felt like a duel. Gibson refused multiple takes, claiming spontaneity was what made him authentic. Howard began shooting backup footage without telling him. Universal executives visited the set twice to prevent a total collapse. When Ransom wrapped, the exhaustion was carved into everyone's face. Howard called it the most draining project of his life. He never worked with Gibson again. Marlon Brando is the fifth name, and Howard once said that working with him was like trying to reason with a hurricane. Their clash in the mid-1990s was brief but completely unforgettable. Brando arrived on set already irritated. He despised schedules, ignored every rehearsal, and refused to memorize a single line. Cue cards had to be taped all around the set so he could glance at them during takes. One afternoon, he stopped filming entirely, announced that the dialogue was garbage, and demanded that it be rewritten immediately. Howard tried to reason with him. Brando smiled, wandered back to his trailer, and stayed there for 3 hours. When he returned, he had decided his character needed an entirely new accent. Nobody knew what he was doing.